Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I'm so delighted you've joined me for part 4 of our story tonight, and it's very, very exciting because Missy would go and stay with her grandparents very often, and on one occasion, on 2 separate occasions, she discovered a ghost was in the woodgrove, some ghost haunting the woodgrove, a young man in a red plaid shirt who she discovered was actually looking for an engagement ring that belonged to his beloved, and this ghost did not appear to know he was dead. She also encountered a hairy man, or what we call Bigfoot, who found it terribly funny that she was chasing after a ghost, and now she has returned to her grandparents' house long after they're dead, and so having not encountered the ghost or the Bigfoot again. So let's continue with our story, but before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with part 4 of our story. About 30 years later, at this point in my life, yes, you've guessed right, my grandparents had long since died. My beloved grandfather, against my father's wishes, who had inspired my writing career, had left his house in the Blue Ridge Mountains to me. My father would naturally have liked me to have sold the place, but I ended up renting it out to holiday makers that visited the area. It made for me a nice tidy income that helped support my writing career, that at this point in time was going nowhere. It hadn't remotely taken off. I was in my 40s and had 4 failed books behind me that had been rejected by publishers. So I was in a fragile state of mind, wondering why I'd put so much time and effort into my stories, only to have no thank you letters sent to me from various publishers all over the place. Of course, my parents were incredibly frustrated with me. I was their only daughter, unmarried and without any children of my own, going down the dreadful life path that they had warned me about, and yes, it had been a lonely one, and in a manner of speaking, I was probably living a hermetic existence, shutting the world out in order to focus on my writing. But the truth was that even if I wanted to do something else with my life, it would have been close to impossible, because my hunger to write was insatiable. I had my grandfather to thank for an income that enabled me to pursue my passion, so that I could rent an apartment in New York and support my humble lifestyle by receiving rent for his house. My grandfather had also given me money in a trust fund, because he knew I would likely need it, so I could focus on my writing without having to support myself like an aspiring actress would, who waitresses tables for a living. "Honestly, love, I warned you about all this," my mother said, looking at me warily when we were having coffee together at a coffee shop in town, and my mother had chosen this quintessential moment to express her grievances to me about the path I had chosen to take for my life. "You're a very good-looking young lady, dear, but looks don't last forever, and you don't want to be left on the shelf, do you? You're in your 40s, Missy, for goodness sake. I do hate to say this, love, but you really aren't getting any younger." "What's that supposed to mean, Mum?" "Well, don't you want to get married, love, and have a child, for goodness sake? There is nothing more satisfying in the entire world than being a mother. And I speak from experience because I've been one to you." "And this is coming from you, is it?" I said sarcastically, rolling my eyes in the back of my head, as if to say, "I've heard everything now. If I remember correctly, you and Dad love nothing better than jaunting all over the globe, leaving me to stay with my grandparents. I don't believe for a second you ever planned to have children. You've never admitted that much to me, but I can read between the lines. I believe I was a mistake. You definitely wanted to devote your lives to travel. That's why you and Dad worked so hard, so that you could get away and travel to all those exciting places. And I'm not judgmental about that at all. I think it's great you did what you did." "Well, that's because, love, we enjoyed travelling so much. But it didn't mean for a second that we didn't love being parents to you. We loved the bones of you, we did. And you know very well that that is true. Yes, we never expected to have a child, but when you came along, You were the very best thing that happened to us. You were far more important to us than travelling all around the world. Your grandparents taking care of you. Well, that was a wonderful thing for them to do. So we had the best of both worlds, didn't we? Because believe it or not, Missy, I really loved being a mother to you. And I don't believe I was a bad mother either. You didn't resent me sending you to your grandparents, did you? No, of course I didn't. Staying with my grandparents was a gift, and yes, you were a fabulous mother. But that doesn't mean that I want to follow your example. But why not, love? There is nothing more satisfying than being a mother. You're in your 40s now, for goodness sake. If you leave it too long, you might not be able to have children. I mean, have you stopped to think about that for a moment, Missy dear? I don't believe you have. Your biological clock is ticking, even as I speak. And I do hope you realize that. Me and your father, well, I don't know how to say this to you, love, without appearing incredibly rude, but we are worried. Your father would love to have grandchildren. I want to focus on my writing career, Mum. I thought I made that very clear to you and Dad. And where has that got you? Said my mother, snapping. You've wasted so much time writing those 4 books. And all for what? They've been rejected one by various publishers. Should that not be telling you something? That you're travelling down a road that is leading to absolutely nowhere. Your father warned you about this, love, throughout your childhood, but you simply refused to listen to his guidance and wisdom. Your father was looking out for you. He knows what it's like to be an author. What's that supposed to mean, Mum? Well, love, all I'm trying to say is maybe it's a good idea to take a long, hard look at yourself, to take stock. I mean, you could get a 9-to-5 job, couldn't you? Live a normal life, why don't you? Socialize, go out on a few dates, meet some interesting people. These days it's a lot easier to meet people than it was back in my day, you know. You shouldn't be alone, love. There are so many eligible bachelors out there who I am quite sure would be delighted to meet you. You know what Gramps would say about that, Mum? If at first I don't succeed, I should try and try again. And that's how I feel about my writing career. And as for dating and socializing, I haven't got time, patience, or energy to do that. And I don't even want to be a mother. Well, I don't believe it, said my mother, rolling her eyes in exasperation. That man is incorrigible, isn't he? I mean, he's been dead for a long time, but he's still influencing your life from beyond the grave. I blame him for all this, I really do. He put those wild, nonsensical ideas into your head when you were a little girl about becoming an author. And you lapped it all up, didn't you, like a dog with its milk? Furthermore, if it wasn't for him leaving you everything, then you wouldn't be able to finance these absurd dreams of yours. And it might have knocked some sense into you. I'm sorry, but I'm going to say this, love, and yes, it's going to hurt, but what the hell? I'm going to say it anyway. Say what, Mum? You're living in a fool's paradise, love. You're completely delusional. I don't believe you will ever be a published author, nor will you become a bestseller. It's a lottery whether you succeed or not, love, and honestly, hand on heart, I'm not sure you're going to make it, love. Life is tough out there, and we don't always get what we want, believe me. I know these things, and we want what's best for you, love, me and your father. Why don't you just get a sensible job? Focus on meeting a nice young man. You're in your 40s, but people in their 40s still can have children, you know. It's when you get to your 50s that becomes an impossibility. The truth is, Mum, you don't give a damn about my writing career, do you? Not really. You think it's all pie in the sky, don't you? The truth is, Mum, you don't give a damn about my writing career. You think it's all pie in the sky, don't you? What you really want for me is to be married, to have 2.4 children. You want that for me, to live a normal life. Yes, I'm not going to deny it, love. That's exactly what I want for you. I won't pussyfoot around about this anymore and tell you exactly what you want to hear. Your father was absolutely right all those years ago. I'm sorry he was, when he tried to warn you about a writing career. He told you to go into journalism, be a teacher or something like that. But no, you wouldn't listen. You know your problem, love, is that you've always been obstinately stubborn. You think you know best for your own life. Sometimes you should listen to your parents, because they also know what's good for you. Oh, so you know what's best for me, Mum, do you? Yes, I do, as it happens. So does your father. One day, love, when you have 100 more rejection letters behind you from various publishers, you're going to reflect on all this and say, what did I do with my life? Why did I shut myself away from society? Why did I have no children? Why didn't I get married? You're going to reflect all over this, love, and realize how desperately sad and lonely you've become. And me and your father are going to die, never having had any grandchildren of our own. It's going to be very sad all around, you know. Oh, so this is what it's really all about? You and Dad wanting grandkids? Of course we want grandchildren. But most of all, we want you to be happy, love. And you don't look remotely happy to me right now. In fact, if the truth be told, I've never seen you look more miserable in my entire life. And I blame it on all this writing. It's sucked the life right out of you, has it not? And yet you refuse to admit it. Of course I don't look happy, Mum. Are you surprised? Yesterday I had another rejection letter in the post. So of course I'm not happy. But it doesn't mean I want to give up on my writing. My writing makes me happy. I don't expect you to understand that, because you've never understood that. My mother rolled her eyes. Here we go again, love. What you don't get is that me and your father love you. We want the best for you. We're only looking out for you. In that case, Mum, will you say no more about this? I'd really appreciate it if you just shut your mouth. But, no buts, Mum. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Let's agree to disagree, shall we? But, Mum, I said, raising my hand in a warning gesture, so my mother's lips opened and closed like a rather startled goldfish that almost looked pained. Mum, there is something I'm going to tell you, and you're not going to like it one bit, I'm afraid. My mother let out a large sigh. What is it now? Is this about your new book idea or something? I'm moving away, Mum. Leaving New York. You're what? You can't do that, love. This is your home. You love it here in New York. All your friends and family are here. I just think that living here in New York might not be the right creative environment for my writing. It might be stifling me a little, that's all. Oh, so you think you need to go to some exotic location to inspire you? Is that it? I think I've heard everything now, love. Don't be like that, Mum. Honestly, is it too far-fetched to believe a new idyllic environment might actually inspire me? Give me more creative ideas? So where are you going to go, love? Timbuktu, are you? No, I've decided to stop renting out Gramps' place and move in there for a while. But why would you do that, love? You like the rental income you receive from the place. Well, why wouldn't I? The Blue Ridge Mountains is where I had my best adventures growing up as a girl. I have so many beautiful memories of that place. The views are spectacular over the mountains. It'll be easy to work in such a secluded place. And I think it will inspire my creative juices. So what do you think? I suppose I shouldn't ask you that question. I'm surprised you even want my opinion, dear. Because the way I see it, you never take what I say to heart. Sometimes I feel with you, I'm just talking to a brick wall. Don't be like that, Mum. Like what? So defensive. Well, you want my opinion, love, do you? I'll give it to you straight. Moving to the Blue Ridge Mountains is a very bad idea as far as I'm concerned. So far away from me and your father and all your friends. It's a ludicrous idea. Sometimes I do wonder what goes on in that head of yours. Mum, I'm not doing anything dramatic. I'm just going to live in my grandparents' house in the Blue Ridge Mountains. What's wrong with that? I do think the environment will inspire me a lot. Lots of writers do these kind of things, you know. Well, who am I to stop you, love? I can see that anything I say to you has absolutely no persuasive influence over you whatsoever. As things panned out, moving to my grandfather's place in the Blue Ridge Mountains was one of the best decisions I have ever made, for it was here that I would write my best-selling novel, and from thenceforth my writing career would open up for me in ways I never gleaned possible. It was in the Blue Ridge Mountains that after my move I would meet my husband, and we would go on to have 2 children, so my parents would not end up feeling short-changed after all. But my grandfather would be proved right. In the end, we should always follow our hearts, for that is the only thing that is going to give your life purpose. Growing up in New York, I had been around a great deal of people, especially wealthy people, who were well-to-do. I'd even met the very wealthy, rather miserable woman, Mrs. Molman, who drove everywhere in her Rolls-Royce. She was a woman that visited the dental surgery regularly, where my mother worked as a receptionist when I was a girl. I do recall being taken one day to one of her glamorous parties. I was left to play with rich kids, and these kids who had absolutely everything that money could possibly buy. They were incredibly spoilt, would consistently say the same 2 words over and over again. I'm bored! I'm bored! What do we do now? I remember thinking, you kids have so much, and that's all you can say. In that moment I had an epiphany that changed my life. I knew I had things a whole lot better than they did. I may not have had great wealth, but I was never ever bored, because I got so much satisfaction from reading my books and writing stories. Boredom was not a word I was well acquainted with, and even as an adult, I was living a very fulfilled life, although my parents never fully appreciated that. When I first arrived at my grandparents' old home in the Blue Ridge Mountains, tears trickled down my cheeks, tears of nostalgia. This I had not expected to happen, but returning back to the old place that I'd kept in pristine condition over the years, for the purposes of my rental customers, rarely felt to me like a coming of home, so to speak. I could almost smell my grandmother's baking from the kitchen, as if she was baking her world-famous lemon chiffon cake. I could almost see my grandfather bursting through the kitchen door as he rattled his fishing tackle that he carried in his arms. I could hear him say, "Nothing was biting today. Those damn fish. Why are they being so dreadfully elusive? Oh, is that lemon chiffon cake I smell? I'm beginning to feel very hungry. I'd like that served warm with some clotted cream and strawberries, if I may." "Oh, Gramps," I said, wiping a tear away. "I miss you so much. But I've come here to write, and there's a bestseller in me yet." My devoted black Labrador Sheba, who lay at my feet every day, gave me an approving woof as if to say, "This is a hell of a lot better than New York." My black Labrador was reasonably old. I'd picked her up from a shelter a year back. I'd go to the shelter asking to see the oldest, most neglected dogs, because an old dog living out its last years was the most suitable companion for a writer. Sheba would stay by my side, and where I went she would cordially follow very faithfully. I would also take her on short, brisk walks, and living out here in the Blue Ridge Mountains appeared to have given her a spring to her step. One day the most extraordinary thing happened. I'd been writing steadily at my computer for a long while. I was suddenly hit with a restless feeling, which of course is not uncommon when you're a writer. I felt frustrated with my writing, almost as if my words had reached a dead end or a cul-de-sac in the road. I knew to get that stuffy cotton wool feeling out of my ears, I needed to take a refreshing walk in the fresh air, and to be inspired by Mother Nature herself, and of course the prepossessing views over the Blue Ridge Mountains. So when I said the word walk, Sheba jumped up, thumping her tail on the floor, and together side by side we sashayed out of the house. I found myself thinking rather wistfully about my trips here as a child, where I would fish by the creek with my grandfather. The memory made me smile. As we walked through the woods, Sheba suddenly began to bark. That was when I saw a familiar flash of a red plaid shirt through the trees. My heart almost stopped its gentle rhythm. Was the ghost of Walter still haunting the grove after all these long years? Was he looking for Marilyn's engagement ring? It would seem so. Sheba continued to bark incessantly, and we both began to run after Walter's ghost. I could see him so clearly, which makes me wonder if a lot of people may have seen ghosts without being aware of it, because to look at, Walter in his red plaid shirt was like any regular person you might actually see crossing the road of a busy street, or taking a casual stroll in the woods. I was definitely seeing his ghost, so I began to call after him, "Walter! Walter!" But the figure just disappeared before my very eyes, and Sheba was as confounded as I was. She looked at me through black eyes and began to whine, almost as if she was saying, "What happened there?" "He's gone," I told Sheba. So we resumed our walk, almost as if nothing had happened, although my mind was now promptly ablaze with all kinds of thoughts. I couldn't help but reflect on how ironic it was on seeing the ghost of Walter after all these long years, when I hadn't been looking for him at all, and now he'd shown up like this out of the blue. As we walked rather casually through the trees, Sheba had her nose pinned to the ground. She seemed to be excited by a scent. Before long she was running over towards a bush of leafy green foliage. She rambunctiously threw up the earth with her paws and began to vigorously dig. And that was when she pulled up what looked like a large animal bone. But as I peered at the ground, something caught my eye, something sparkling. I picked up the thing that glinted in the light. It was dusty, covered with dirt, but I was sure I knew exactly what it was, and I couldn't get home fast enough. I dashed into the house with Sheba at my side, running to the kitchen sink, and began to scrub the tiny thing in my hand. And sure enough, I'd found the diamond and sapphire engagement ring all those years later, still in perfect condition. The ring that Walter, my grandfather's friend, had lost all those years ago. I really didn't know what to do with the ring. I stared at it incredulously and said out loud, "Walter, wherever you are, I've got your engagement ring. You can come and get it. I'll put it on my nightstand, and I hope after that you can finally rest in peace." It was every morning and late afternoon, before it got dark, that I followed the same regime every day. Because when you're a writer, you live by your routines. I would spend many long hours at my computer, with Sheba lying across my feet as a foot warmer. It was late afternoon in the fall, and it was so pretty looking out from the upstairs window of my grandfather's house, over the mountains. I'm not sure what time it was, but my mother phoned me, so I answered her call. "Hi, Mum." "Hello, love. I've been thinking about you there on your own. You really should come up to New York for the weekend. Me and your father would love to see you. I'm missing you dreadfully, love. How is Sheba doing?" "Oh, she's loving it here in the mountains. It's like coming here has given her a new lease of life. You'll never believe what happened the other day. Remember that ghost story I told you about?" "Oh, you mean the ghost of Walter? The one in the red plaid shirt? Don't tell me you saw him again. I don't believe it." "I did, as it happens. It was him." "Goodness gracious me, love. That's dreadful. You don't think he's still searching the woodgrove for his beloved engagement ring? His poor soul really needs to rest. It's been long enough for him, hasn't it? I think your Gramps was right. He certainly doesn't appear to know he's dead. What happened? Did he see you?" "No, I saw him in the woods. He was as solid and real as you and me. If you had seen him, you would never have believed he was a ghost, not even for a second." "How extraordinary, love. What on earth did you do?" "Well, I called his name. I ran after him. So did Sheba. I said, 'Walter, Walter,' but he just disappeared in front of my eyes. He more or less faded away, I suppose. I think Sheba was as confounded as I was." "Oh, dear. Well, I suppose that was inevitably going to happen, wasn't it? I mean, ghosts don't exactly have a habit of sticking around, do they?" That's not all. It isn't. No. You won't believe this, Mum, but Sheba picked up a smell in the grove. She began digging up the ground. She retrieved an old bone of a dead animal. Actually, she brought it back home with her. Oh, please, love, I don't need to hear these grisly details. I must remind you, I'm going out with your father for dinner tonight. There's a lovely new Italian not far from where we live, which I've heard raving reviews about, and I would thank you kindly to let me eat my meal without thinking about putrid trophies that Sheba brings back home with her. You aren't listening, Mum. When Sheba was digging up the ground, I noticed something glinting in the soil. It was congealed with mud, but I picked it up, took it home, cleaned it up, and believe it or not, I know I found Walter's diamond and sapphire engagement ring after all these long years. You never! Goodness gracious me! That is absolutely incredible. What were the chances of that ever happening? I don't know what to say, love. But I think you need to light a candle. Tell Walter you've got his ring, and hope he hears you. I think that ghost needs to be reunited with the ring, don't you? And then maybe he'll finally rest. As I was talking to my mother on the phone, I suddenly observed a black shadowy form slipping through the trees. I was sure for a moment that this thing was looking my way and actually beckoning to me. Had I imagined it? Was that the hairy man that I'd seen all those years ago, chuckling at me for running after a ghost? I couldn't be sure, but I needed to find out. I've got to go, Mum. I'm really sorry. But why, love? The conversation has only just got interesting. This is a turn-up for the books, is it not? Finding Walter's diamond engagement ring of all things. I do want to hear more. Wait until your father hears about this. You know him. He enjoys a good story. Sorry, Mum, I've got to go, I said rather brusquely, cutting her off. I rocketed out of the house as fast as I could, with Sheba at my side, who was barking excitedly, as if I'd suddenly invented a brand new, wildly exciting game. Certainly my burst of adrenaline had impacted her ebullience. She seemed to forget that she had a touch of arthritis in her legs. She ran like the wind through the trees, with me eagerly following close behind her, begging her to slow down. When I entered the woodgrove, I suddenly felt incredibly foolish. Because if it was the Bigfoot that I'd encountered as a girl, that I'd seen disappearing through the trees, there was nothing to suggest that this was indeed the case, as nothing was around me, absolutely nothing, just trees and more trees. The woodgrove was completely silent. I looked around me in bewilderment, and I felt desperately silly. What was I like, following what I believed to be a dark, shadowy mass into the grove? It was probably nothing, a trick of the light perhaps, or wishful thinking on my part. Certainly over the years I'd watched endless documentaries on the subject of Bigfoot, since my own bizarre encounter, and since my grandfather's incredulous story about a Bigfoot that had been like a horse whisperer to Farmer Eldon's grey mare, who had become increasingly distressed after her first foal had been born dead. Indeed, there was an outer-worldly, transcendental ambience in the woodgrove at this moment, the likes of such that I've never felt before or since. And even as a writer by profession, I find it close to impossible to describe the preternatural celestial mood of the woods that day. It was like the woodgrove had morphed into something mystical, something magical, that would make you believe in the substance of children's fairy tales as being more real than actually fictitious. I persuaded myself that the outer-worldly impressions that I'd picked up in the woods, that gave me the very certain feeling that I was caught up on the yellow brick road, wearing a pair of sparkling red slippers, like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, had a whole lot to do with the time of day it actually was. It was the late afternoon, drifting into the early evening. The sun was setting over the horizon, in a bedazzling kaleidoscope of rather fetching salmon pinks and very ethereal golds, that had cast its gossamer light in sprinkles of scintillating glitter over the leafy green foliage that surrounded me on every side. So was it any wonder it felt so special, almost as if the whole woodgrove had become like a subtropical paradise. Sheba was behaving rather strangely as she sniffed the air, almost as if she'd picked up a rather peculiar scent on the wind that she could not fathom. All of a sudden she burst into excited barking, and she began to bark at some leafy green foliage, with her dark eyes fixed on the shrubbery. All of a sudden a curtain of foliage began to quake and quiver, and then a black hand emerged, followed by a large body, which began to reveal itself to me. It was a Bigfoot, and Sheba did not see the creature differently to any other human being, even though he was covered with hair, because she promptly bolted over to the Bigfoot, wiggling her body ebulliently and practically throwing herself at the Bigfoot, demanding to be stroked. The Bigfoot began to chuckle. He held his stomach and laughed, just as he had done when I was a child, and I could not help but laugh myself, for his amusement was infectious. The Bigfoot's humorous eyes remained fixed on me. I knew at once I was seeing exactly the same Bigfoot I had seen as a little girl. We both recognized each other, and the Bigfoot chuckled again. "I remember you," he said to me telepathically. "Funny little thing you were. I'm glad you're back. He needs your help. He still doesn't know he's dead. They say you are the only one that can help him. They told me to give you the message." "Who told you to give me what message?" I asked. "Your grandfather told me. He told me this in spirit. He wants you to help his friend. He says his friend is lost. He tells me that you can help his friend. He says you found what he's looking for. You need to tell him. That's why I called you here." "But how could you call me?" I asked the Bigfoot. "I did. Why are you here now, then?" "Well, I thought I saw you going into the woods, that's all, but I wasn't sure it was you." "You followed me because I called you. Now he'll be here in any minute," the Bigfoot told me. Seconds later, I heard the thumping of heavy boots, and I knew it was Walter's ghost, and I immediately ran after him, calling him. "Walter! Walter! Walter!" I cried out. "Walter!" I ran after the ghostly figure, with Sheba at my side. Sheba was barking excitedly. The ghost of Walter stopped for a brief moment. He looked at me with his piercing blue eyes that reminded me of my grandfather's. "You're dead, Walter! You're dead! You've been dead for a long time! Marilyn is waiting for you on the other side. If you want the diamond ring, I've got it. It's on my nightstand." I didn't know if Walter's ghost heard what I'd said, because he looked straight ahead of me, through his piercing blue eyes, turned around and walked away. I tried to find the Bigfoot again, but he had all but gone. That night I returned to bed and read a book. I fell fast asleep, with Sheba lying on my feet. I had left Walter's diamond ring on the nightstand. I was awoken in the middle of the night by my dog's growls. I suddenly felt very certain that someone was in the room with me, and it wasn't just Sheba. But when I looked around my bedroom, it was covered in ambiguous dark shadows, with a soft moonlight filtering through the room as I hadn't fully closed the curtains. I knew Sheba was seeing something. That was because she was whining and looking up at something that I could not physically see. But I absolutely knew someone was there. I could feel the energy. I could feel eyes watching me. And then for a brief second, like a flash of a photograph, I saw Walter standing by my bed. There was a huge smile on his face, and then he was gone. And when I looked down at my nightstand, the diamond engagement ring that Walter had been looking for so long had all but vanished. I realized that Walter's ghost must have taken the ring, and I don't even know how he did that. Sheba stopped whining, and everything became very calm, and then I drifted off into a deep sleep again, where I experienced a lucid dream that was so incredibly real. In my dream, a woman in a white dress, whom I'd never ever seen before, floated towards me. She was holding out her hand, and on her finger she was wearing Walter's diamond engagement ring. Then I saw a man floating in on the scene, taking the woman's hands. He was dressed in white. It was Walter. The scene folded away before my eyes. Then I saw a vision of my grandparents. My grandfather was smiling at me through his piercing blue eyes, and he said to me, "You go, girl, write that novel." And the very next morning, when I woke up, I did just that. It was almost as if the words bounced freely into my head. The story flowed seamlessly. And when I completed the book and sent it off to the publishers, it must have been a few weeks later when I received the confirmation from them that they wanted to publish my work, and it soon became a bestseller. So with trembling fingers, I had phoned my mother. "Yes, love, what is it?" came my mother's voice. "Mum, I'm getting published." "You're what?" "I told you, I'm getting published. Can you believe that?" "Sorry, love. Say that again, will you?" "I'm getting published, Mum." "You're getting published? Well, I don't know what to say, love. That's absolutely incredible. I can't believe it. I'm so happy. Wait until I tell your father about this." That, of course, was not the only shock my mother had to endure. There were many more shocks that came her way. Shocks I don't think she was prepared for. But I'm glad to say my mother had a reasonably strong constitution. "Ma'am, I'm getting married." "Sorry, love. What did you say?" "I told you, I'm getting married." "You're not. Is this some kind of a joke or something?" "Of course it's not. Why would I make something like this up, Mum?" "But you're winding me up. You have to be." "No, I'm not." "Who is he, love? Why don't I know about this?" "Because it's been a bit of a whirlwind romance, Mum. I was swept off my feet, you could say." "And now, love, you've swept me off mine. Who is he, love? Why don't I know about any of this?" "Because it's been a whirlwind romance, and I've been swept off my feet. I really, really like him, Mum, and I'm actually pregnant." "You're pregnant? You're pregnant? Oh, my word! Well, you've blown me off my feet, love. I know nothing about this man of yours, but your pregnancy, I've never been more pleased in my life. I'm very looking forward to meeting him, I have to say." "His name is Oliver Turnbull, Mum, and he's absolutely amazing. You're going to love him. He's everything I'm looking for in a man." "Oh, goodness gracious, I don't think my heart can take this great news. You have made me and your father incredibly happy, love. I thought that we would never be grandparents. This calls for a celebration." And celebrate we did in the weeks to come, until my parents both became grandparents, and from thenceforth I never ever heard a whisper from them about my being in the wrong career. So there you are. That's my story. Well, I don't know what to say. Wasn't that the most marvellous, marvellous story? I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I look forward to you leaving your comments. But goodness gracious, I was so happy that the ghost of Walter found his peace, because they do say that ghosts are very attached to things sometimes, and that's why they can't pass over to the other side. And so, obviously, in her dream state, when she had that dream where Walter appeared to her with his long-lost love, it was clear they were reunited again. And the Bigfoot, oh, what a lovely Bigfoot, laughing like mad at her chasing after a ghost. What an incredibly charming story. And, oh, wow, I loved every minute of it. So, until next time, goodbye and good night.